Very shortly, I will talk about my background. I'm part of a team which is called Codesignlab, which is working on the intersection between collaborative design, computational thinking, and self-construction. Codesignlab is a very interdisciplinary practice, I would say. I started in a very, very dry way my studies in design architecture, more as an environmental engineer. I hold a PhD in environmental engineering. So I was very concerned about how I could eventually develop my practice using environmental data as a generative driver. Of course, I was quite skeptical about this greenwashing related to sustainable design and all this very traditional way of developing the topic. So I try to shift during my studies on diverse notion of ecological design, something that should eventually bridge environmental issues to social and mental ecology. So at the same time, as an architect and an environmental engineer, I was interested in technology. I'm still interested in technology, always questioning what is the role of technology. So I really enjoy the position of Cedric Price according to this way of questioning what is the reason why we are interested in technology. And of course, my personal background also came over, helping me to put my foot on the ground. So I start to understand that technology is a collective practice. It's a cultural way to share knowledge, and also is a driver to create equal possibilities to our societies. And of course, I'm interested in tools. Tools are giving the possibility to people to be self-sufficient somehow. So sometimes designer and architects should maybe think more in tools than on objects. So one of the investigation on Codesignlab is really related to tools. Of course, I'm interested in digital culture. I'm a parametric design somehow. So I'm interested in using parametric issues as a paradigm to create interrelation between data and shapes, and so using data in a generative ways. But I'm an architect. I'm interested in construction, very physical understanding of architecture, spatial understanding. I'm interested in construction that are somehow fragile because are built with diversified people. And this is one of the constraints of our practice. And this is about negotiation. And negotiation is about fragility. So we work with the fragile process and with precarious structures, I would say. Not structurally speaking, precarious because they are dealing with unexpected issues. So we are creating a very controversial bridge between communities, material systems, and local ways of evolve techniques. We are interested in education. I'm an architect, I'm a designer, I'm an independent researcher, but I'm interested in teaching. So I've been teaching in France, UK, in Italy, but I've been especially interested in teaching in countries where there is a lack of school of design and architecture. So we created this project almost 10 years ago in an itinerant school of ecological design. Now it's almost 1.5 years we are based in Cameroon, in Douala. And the school is starting to create a very site-specific approach to technology, digital fabrication, and community-oriented projects. So, of course, the background is informing also what the kind of agenda that we would want to develop for Reciprocity. So we started almost 1 year ago with some meeting with Giovanna and Jean-Philippe, and we started to do some researches on what is the story of this place. The story of this place is made out of natural resources. So we start to work with this very interesting paradox in between the natural environment that these resources were originally coming from and the industrial revolution aspects related to that. So actually we started to work with this idea that industrial revolution are creating fluxes of migrations, which is very related to precariousness, actually. So we started very specific research on archives related to how this region and all the northern Europe were dealing with this very enthusiastic way of building a new economy out of coals, and how the side effects of this were informing the creation of a new society, which is actually what is happening in the creation of Europe. So the paradox is also that this was creating a very fragile community that was integrated. I started to focus on an Italian community because my origin, but I would say that this was a stratification of fluxes that is still very contemporary. It's what is happening right now in Italy, so there is a parallel. The story is always informing the way our society. So I would say that it's very important how architecture is learned from the story. So the story is about why people move from one point to one place to another, and we start to do some research on documentary, and the worker of the mines here in the Legi were actually coming from a very beautiful place in Italy, very rich place, and was quite interested in understanding why they were living. And they would say, because we will feel precarious in our country. Precarious because we didn't have a proper job and a proper house. And this is very a sort of a contradiction, I would say, because they sacrifice all their life because of this idea of precariousness, because they were starting in a very, very hard condition of living and working. So this is something that is happening everywhere around the world. It's not just in the 30s and the 50s in Europe. It's still going. People are moving from one place to another just because of coals or other mines economies. But of course we were interested in this stratification of data, how we could eventually transpose this stratification of data, migrations and mines activity, and how we could use this as a creative drive in our project. So of course we had some physical experience. We started to go underneath in very interesting place here in Belegny, make some questions to former mines. And we discovered that actually it was a sort of proud. People were really proud about that. Also because of the kind of social aspects related to the work. So we were interested in working with this additive and subtracting way of working with natural environment, subtracting material and transforming the landscape in a very artificial way. And we started to develop some living, I would say, mapping exercise, starting to work on this idea to create a new way of dealing with this material eventually in order to produce a local factory, transforming this material into something else. And we start to do some very interesting workshop. The first one was with the School of Architecture of ULG, and the second and the third were with some local designer and artisans. But of course, we were working with this agenda of treating materials, filtering, but also materials were mixing with material coming from where the people were originally from. We were actually proposing the possibility of a new third material out of that. So we were interested to integrate this stratification of material in the possibility of using computer-aided manufacturing to synthesize this. And we did it in different ways. One of that was the idea of creating an archive, a material library that could inform our production. And we start in our laboratories to create this archive in many directions, with the possibility of having a sort of a protocol of using this material, filtering and also creating different mix. For us, this was the beginning of a possible local factory using composite material as something that could actually create a new way, a new understanding of working with the semi-fluid materials in the region. And we were working on materials that were actually mixed with clay and ceramic, because also we wanted to push the fragility of the material. And we wanted to think how we could use this composite material also in architectural production, construction. So we actually started to create an architecture that could eventually be at the same time a laboratory, an archive, and a micro infrastructure, something that could be a living infrastructure. So the provocation actually that we wanted to share with you, of course, we actually developed a physical module of this project, but the idea was to create a module that could be eventually replicated in the landscape for different ways of use the local materials in a more, let's say, contemporary way. So the project is an archive, but it's not a nostalgic archive. It's more like something, a device that could eventually inform different production. Of course, it's a matter of scale. We actually discussed with the curator of the Reciprocity project the idea that the device itself could be eventually reused after the exhibition. So we are very interested in we normally don't. We are not used to work in museums, so we were concerned about the possibility of having something that could eventually adapt to the landscape. What we, for now, I mean, our concern is that the project that we have in the museum is the first step of something that has to happen. So it's the beginning of a project. Thank you very much.